Cute robot time. Let's do this. Let's delete these bad boys and let's burn some rubber. That was a terrible joke. I'm so sorry. Let's start with a torus. This will form the basis of the Tyre. So let's just put in some of these values. And feel free to follow along, put the same values. So 0.13 for the major radius and 0.059 for the minor radius. We want to rotate that on the y-axis by 90 degrees. And of course we need to apply the transforms. We'll come to that later though. Let's shade smooth that by right clicking, shade smooth. So we've got some nice geometry to work with there, got some nice square quads to work with. So I'm going to use Auto Mirror, which is built into Blender. So head over to Preferences and enable that if you want to. Or you can just make the mirror object yourself just by deleting one half of it and adding the modifier, but this does it for you automatically, as you can see there. But that's not quite what we expected, and can you guess why? There you go, we've got the transforms as I mentioned. We need to apply that, so press Ctrl A and apply the rotation. Let's turn on the keyboard shortcuts, always forget to do that. There we go, Auto Mirror. Don't forget to undo the previous Auto Mirror. And with that, let's head into face mode. Press 3 on your keyboard or select the icon in the top left there. So what we're going to do is we're going to select every other polygons, those 3 just there. We only need to worry about a quarter of this. The rest of it we'll copy this part here as I'm just showing you there. And with those selected, you can press Alt E and extrude the faces along normals. Something like that is cool. That's going to form the basis of our treads, basically. Let's just make that nice and neat. Let's go for 425. Or not. 0.005. Right, so now we want to go into edge mode. Press 2 on the keyboard if you like, and select an edge and press G twice. And pressing G twice enables sliding. Works for vertices and edges. And as you can see, we've got overlapping vertices now, so we need to get rid of those. So select all vertices by pressing A, right click, merge vertices. Great, what's next? So what we're going to do now is just move everything along to the right a little bit, and that will create a gap in the middle. For that to work, you need to turn off the mirror modifier because we have clipping enabled, or you could just turn off clipping to be fair. Now I was going to select this edge loop and extrude it, however we did extrude the faces. Now we have a non-perfectly circular. I actually forgot to merge these as well, so I'll do that now. So you can select one vertex, a target vertex, and then press Alt M, or is it M now? I can't remember which one. I think Blender changed that. And select to target. So just quickly do that, get rid of all of these, like that, merge them together, and that creates our nice circle. So we'll pop over into edge mode, Alt click to select the edge loop, and now we can just press E to extrude, right click, or not even that, just press ES, E for extrude, S for scale. It's going to make a slight adjustment, something like that. And with that done, we can now extrude that along the X axis to meet in the middle. Now it's worth turning the mirror modifier back on for this, so that when it snaps to the middle there, or not snaps, it clips to the middle. So with that done, we can now copy 1/4 of the tyre. So that means deleting the 3/4 left. So let's head over to wireframe mode, use box select, and hold down shift to make another box selection. And with that selected, press delete vertices. Just like that. Now we've got this cool section. And it's important the next operation you do in one go. So select all, Shift D, and of course, let's use the 3D cursor as our pivot point. So Shift D, R for rotate, 90, enter. And with that done, you can press Shift R and that lovely bit of magic happens. As you can see, we have overlapping vertices there. We've got some nasty seams. So select all again, right click, merge vertices by distance. Great. That's looking cool, if not a little bit primitive, which is what we want. Keep it simple, as they say. So I'll rename that to Tyre. Ah, yes. Oh, I love that movie. Brilliant. We're going to do the twist. So what I'm going to do here is just select a couple of edge loops where we made that recess, turn on proportional editing, connect it only. And in this case, I'm going to use sharp. I found that one worked better for this example. And to do that, I'm going to split the window. So click anywhere in the corner and drag. That will normally split the window. And one of the views, I'm going to have the front view. That's 1 on the numpad. And on the other view is the side view. That's 3 on the numpad. So we can see exactly what we're doing now. Let's head over to the rotate tool. And let's give that a rotation. If you hold down Control while you're doing this, that will snap with 5-degree increments. And of course, move your mouse wheel. Scroll your mouse wheel to change the area of influence. And I think that's looking about right. Let's join these windows back together now. Cool. Let's throw on a subdivision surface modifier. And I think viewport levels to 2 as well, just so we can see how that looks. That's looking pretty good. Happy with that. So now we're going to delete these inner faces. We don't need these. So you can select these face loops and press delete. And now we're going to borrow, in hindsight, this was not the best idea in the world I ever had. But we're going to borrow an edge. Actually, no, we're going to make a line, sorry. We'll come to the rim in a minute, but I did 2 loop cuts there with Control R. I'm going to delete this one, so Control Delete will dissolve the edge. And I'm going to select this edge loop we just created, and we're going to bevel it. So Control B, and if you have more than one segment showing, just scroll your wheel until you just see what you see there on the screen. Something like that is fine. Then we can switch to the front view, 1 on the numpad, press E to extrude, and just bring that out on the X axis. Let's see what that looks like. That looks neat, but it's probably a little bit too aggressive. If you see tyres, they don't have this so well defined. In fact, I exaggerated it as it is. Anyway, I'm going to select one of the outer edge loops at the top there, Alt click, and then press GG. Oops, let's turn off proportional editing. So with that done, press GG and slide it until it smacks into the other one really. And again, we need to merge the vertices. So select all, right click, and merge by distance. Great. Let's see what that looks like now. Yeah, that's much better. That's looking really cool. So let's make the tyre rim. As I said, I'm going to borrow this edge loop here. And in hindsight, this was not the best idea in the world I ever had because there's too much geometry there. But anyway, you could start with a cylinder, to be fair, if you want to do that, or a circle with 16 sides, and then add a subdiv modifier to increase the density. But in this case, I went for the edge, but never mind, we'll just carry on with that. So split that off into its own object by pressing P, duplicate it first, Shift D, press P to separate it into another object. I renamed it to Tyre rim. And with those vertices selected, press E to extrude, S for scale. And we're still scaling towards the 3D cursor. Let's put that back to medium point. Doesn't really matter at this point, so but I'll undo it anyway. Whoops. So E to extrude, S for scale, and we'll bring that in, something like that. Let's switch to the front view and wireframe. And let's pull that in until we get a give or take 45-degree slope. And we're going to press E to extrude, S for scale. Let's turn off the subdiv actually. And back to the front view again. And just bring that out about halfway to the perimeter. You really don't have to do what I'm doing here. You can just make up your own rim style. That's cool. Okay, let's right click and shade smooth. Now, under the object properties there, or the normals properties I should say, let's turn auto smooth on. The default is 30 degrees. We can always tweak that later or turn it off. So with this edge loop again, let's press E to extrude, S for scale, and bring that in, something like that. And then E to extrude, X for the X axis. That will give you the red line. And we'll bring that in a little bit there. Now we can press F to create a face and fill that hole. And press I to inset. And that forms the basic rim for now. Let's select this outer edge loop here. And I'm going to bring it out just shy of the tyre. And we want to give that some thickness, like a rim. So let me just turn wireframe on, if I can find it. There it is. So we can see what we're doing a bit better. We'll bring that in about there. E to extrude, S for scale, and just give that some thickness. Now we can move this out later on, don't worry about that if it's not quite shy of the tyre. So just to turn off the tyre for a second. And with that edge loop selected still, we can press E to extrude and then X to bring it along the X axis. And once again we can press E to extrude and S for scale just to cap off the inner edge, just like that. In principle, that's all you need to do. Next part is just adjusting it so it doesn't go through the tyre, which we can look through. You can see there from the inside of the tyre, it's gone through the skin, or the rubber, I should say. So let's tap into edit mode again, turn off the tyre so it doesn't get in the way. And let's just make sure we've selected all of these parts. So, in fact, you can press Control, Numpad plus, Control, hold down Control and the Numpad plus and minus to grow the selection. And with those selected, let's just bring them out. Something like that will be absolutely fine. Cool. Let's turn off actually the wireframe for a second. Let's turn subdivisions back on. And it's a bit of a mess, right? So let's just have a look and see how much geometry we're actually getting. So if you turn off optimal display and turn wireframe back on, you can see there we've got a really dense geometry, which we don't want at all. Which is why I think it's better to start with a 16-sided cylinder or 32, whichever you prefer, probably 32 actually. So I think 1 and 1 for these will be fine. For the rim, not the tyre. The tyre should be 2 and 2, or even 3. But this one in particular needs to be 1 and 1 for the render, for the subdiv. Okay. Added a bevel modifier, and let's put that above the subdivision modifier and after the mirror modifier. Let's turn wireframe back on so we can see the effect of the bevel modifier. I'm going to change the shape to 1. And for now, let's leave that to angle, which is the default. Put that to 0. So we start off with a clean slate. And keep an eye on the smaller parts, because we haven't got much space to work with. So hold down Shift if you can, and click and drag in that value. Now, it might be that the model is so small, or smaller than it would like, that even using Shift doesn't give you the fine increments that you expect, in which case you can just click in there and add an extra 0 and a number. I use 0.0005. But that's a really tight edge, but that's fine for now. You can also add these manually, of course, using edge loops with Control R. Don't have to use the bevel modifier. Just another way to do it. It gives you more control, I guess. Okay, let's turn off the wireframe again, which I've set to my quick favorites. So if you're not sure how to do that, have a look it up. You can see there we've got a gap between the rim and the tyre. So we need to make sure that these are a little bit closer to the tyre. Let's just drag that. About there is good. Actually, a neat trick to see if you have any gaps is to turn on face orientation. If you see any red, that means you can see through the gap. I've decided here to make this a little bit thicker, so with that edge loop selected, just press S for scale and bring it in a little bit more. And perhaps bring that out to give it some more thickness in the x-axis as well. Okay, that's looking good. And very simple part, this part, and the next part is just copy that face there, select the face, Shift D to duplicate it, press P to separate it into its own object. And I called it Tyre Rim Hub. And with that face selected, just extrude it. I'll speed this up because it's it's basically a cylinder with far too many sides, unfortunately. So I do encourage you to use a simpler cylinder. So feel free to perhaps pause the video after this point and recreate something that you like. Simple shapes. It's important to add the insets there as well. And we've got the same modifiers, of course, from the other object. Okay, so I realized at this point that I wanted the rim to be larger. So we'll go back into the tyre with Edit, add a loop cut here, right click to leave it in the center, and we'll select these faces and delete them, give us more space for the rim. So it's just a simple process now of selecting the rim and the hub and scaling them up. I chose to do this in edit mode, so I don't have to apply transforms. But if you do it in if you do it in object mode, make sure that you apply the transforms with Control A. Right, so with that done, let's bring that out. I'm trying to see if I can spot a gap here. And here we are. Turn on face orientation. You can see we have a gap where we can see through to the red on the other side. So that helps us see what we're doing a bit better. That's looking fine. So next step, just do the same for the hub. You can select everything and just bring that out in edit mode. In fact, we can just box select this part here and bring it out about there. And we can select the inner ones and just bring them right to the center like that. And that's it for that. That's all we need to do for the rim for now. And what I then noticed was that this tyre should probably, I'd like it to go inwards a little bit more. So I'm going to select this edge loop here, turn on proportional editing, and this time, so we use the same, let's try the same. Let's bring that in so we get more of a rounded shape. And of course, once you've done that, you need to adjust the rim and the hub. Let's turn on face orientation so we can see the gap. I'll do that in edit mode again. Something like that is fine. I'm probably being too picky, as usual. And quickly do the same for the hub part. It's actually pretty good where it is, but let's bring it in a little bit. That would do. Great, so I decided to put a kind of, I think I called it a hub cap. And for this I used the quad sphere, which you can get with the extra objects, mesh objects in the preferences. So I do encourage you to turn that on. It's got some useful shapes to add there. So I'm going to go with this quad sphere and bring that down. Again, you notice I did that in edit mode, but all transforms you do on the object level, of course. But for the scaling, let's do it this way. You can see there we've got 0, and for the scale we have 1. Let's shade smooth that as well. Let's turn wireframe on and switch to the front view with 1 on your numpad. Switch to wireframe mode or X-ray mode like that. Select half on the left and let's delete those vertices. Now we've got this hole in the back. You can select these loops here, this loop. Let's add the 3D cursor to selected. You can do that with Shift S to bring that menu up, Shift S. And we're going to use the 3D cursor as our transform point again. So let's add a face there by pressing F to fill that. And with that face selected, I press I to inset it. Wasn't too sure how big to make that because we're going to adjust that in a second to make the rest of the geometry work a bit better. But we'll get to that in a second. So now let's select all of these vertices. And remember we have the 3D cursor as our transform point. So I'm going to use the scale tool and click on the red axis there. And just bring that in until you get a dome shape. A flattened dome shape anyway. Something like that is good. Let's turn off the X-ray. Now we have this kind of button shape really. Now let's think about the holes where the bolts or the nuts will show really. So we're going to select some faces here and delete them. But as I started to do that, remember the back side of that we added the inset for that face. Well, it makes sense to the lower, but the bottom of those faces there, I want that to be the same height on the other side. So we'll get round to doing that in a second using probably wireframe mode. So you can see they're not quite lined up. It's hard to see from this angle, but yeah, you can just about make out there. Yeah, so we want that point to be level with the points at the back in a straight line as much as we can. It doesn't have to be exact. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scale down the face, and I'm going to split the window to help me do that, get 2 points of view. Let's swap that view there so we can see that face that we want to talk about. And I've isolated the shape by pressing the question mark or / key on the keyboard. So with that face selected, we want to bring it just to about that point there. Let's scale that down to there. And that's good enough. Yeah, that's exactly what we want. Let's switch back to face mode, and I've collapsed the windows, of course. I'm going to add 2 loop cuts there. Tip, don't add 2 loop cuts, add 1, because I added 1 too many. So anyway, I'll select these faces here, and we'll do the same on the side as well. So holding down Shift, click these faces, and we can delete those. Lovely, and let's add a modifier, subdivision. Let's turn off wireframe. That's looking okay. You probably want 2 levels as well for this. And now we can start filling these gaps. So you can select a couple of edges initially and press F, and then press F, and it will fill it automatically for you. And you can see there, I've added 1 too many loop cuts. So I shall Alt click and select those and dissolve them with Control Delete. And with the remaining edge loop, I'm going to scale that up so it's roughly in the middle. And now I can select that edge and press F to fill the holes, and do the same, of course, on the side there. There we go. Nice. Let me turn that back on. Let's turn optimal display off. You can see it's a little bit blocky, so we probably need 2. As long as you've got 2 on the render, that's all that's important. Viewport can be 1. So with that face selected at the back, I'm going to inset it by pressing I. That will give it some support, that's why we're doing that. The next step is to add some bevels. So let's select all of these leading edges around the holes we just made, or the cutouts. So it's those ones you want to select. And let's do the same for the other ones, but I did it in 2 steps for some reason. And press Ctrl B to add a bevel. And it's important you have the shape to 1 and the segments to 2. Now you can copy the value there by hovering your mouse over it and pressing Ctrl C. So when you do the bevel on these edges now, and you get the same options pop up, just press Ctrl V when you hover your mouse over the width, like that. Or you can eyeball it, doesn't really matter. Let's turn that back on, and that's looking lovely. Yeah, it really helps define the shape now. If you remember back to the Tyre, we're going to use the same technique. We're going to delete 3/4 of this, and then duplicate and rotate in one swift move. That way you can press Shift R to repeat it. So let's head over to wireframe mode or X-ray mode, select half, and then select the bottom half. So Shift drag, and then delete vertices. Let's make sure we've got everything we have. Yep. Now switch to face mode or whatever, doesn't really matter. Use the 3D cursor as our origin point, transform point. So Shift D to duplicate, R for rotate, 90, enter. And then Shift R to repeat that. Perfect. And merge vertices. Hurrah! It is, look at that. That's lovely. That's worked out really well. Let's turn back to medium point. Turn on vertex snapping. And if you click on the red arrow, hold down the Control key, will turn on snapping while you're doing the transform. What I'm going to do now is add a bit more detail to this. In fact, before I do that, these edges here are a bit too soft. They need a bit more definition. So let's select those with Alt click and Shift Alt click. And we're going to apply a bevel to that as well. So Control B and apply roughly the same width for the bevel. That's fine. Let's turn on subdiv again. That's looking a lot nicer now. Next step is to add a bit more detail And for this, I'm going to use the Loop Tools add-on. So head over to Preferences, Add-ons, and just type in Loop. You can see Let Me Loop Tools. That comes with Blender. In fact, all of the add-ons I use come with Blender. I do have plenty of add-ons that I've bought, but I don't use them in my videos to keep it as accessible to the viewers as best I can. Anyway, selecting those faces there, I pressed I to inset. And with that done, I'm going to select these edge loops here, or these edges, and then Loop Tools, Circle. So right click, Loop Tools, Circle. Thanks, Bharat. Very kind. That gives us a nice circular fit for those edges. Now we can select these faces here. And if we scale these in a little bit, it does go a little bit weird. You can see we have some indentation. I wasn't expecting that. And you can see there, it just dips in, which is not what we want. So what we can do is select all of those vertices in that loop, in that ring, just there. Oops, let's click there instead. So select all of these vertices. Let's just pull them out just a little bit. That's all it needs, really. And with that done, let's select these faces again. Press I to inset and give it a small inset. Now we can alt-click this edge, these face loops here. Switch to the front view, one on the numpad, and we can press E to extrude, and then X, and bring that in as far as you like, doesn't really matter. There's me faffing around with how deep should it go. That'll be fine. So it's looking a bit messy at the moment. That's because we haven't added any support loops. So, but firstly, let's make these edges here round as well. So right click, Loop Tools, Circle. That worked really, really well. That helps to maintain the circular shape. And we're going to select these faces again at the front, in the middle. And can you guess what we're going to do? Yeah, press I to inset. It does get a little bit weird there, but you can just move around these four vertices. Just select all four and press S for scale and distribute those a bit nicer. Great. It's not perfect, but it doesn't need to be. It's a hub, so it's going to get knocked and it's going to get scraped. So I don't mind that it has a... In fact, I just knocked my watch on the desk. There you go. So having said that, let's select these edge loops here and Control B and give them a bevel again, like we did with the original hub part. So use shape of 1, segments 2. And that's looking really nice now. Oh my gosh, that looks painful. Right, let's add these nuts and bolts. So I'm going to add a cylinder. 6 sides is all it needs. I'll speed through that because this is really simple stuff. A basic cylinder with 6 sides. Rotate it on the y-axis by 90 degrees. And apply the rotation, of course. There we go. Now tab into edit mode. And we're going to make some simple inset and extrudes. Let's make sure we're on medium point. Selecting that face, press I to inset. And then E to extrude. And press I to inset again. And again. Now we can select these faces that we've just created here and E to extrude. And we still have snap inset to vertex. So if you hold down the control key, move your mouse over another vertex somewhere else, it will snap to that depth. Make sure you click on the arrow when you do that, the red arrow. And for the rear of that, I'm going to select that face and give it an inset. That's going to help give it a bit more support when we add some more bevels. So I'm going to delete this face. I'm not going to add a subdivision modifier to this, just the bevel modifier. And let's turn the amount to 0 for now. The profile shape set to segments 2 for now. Let's turn on wireframe so we can see what we're doing. As I said, hold down the shift key. Doesn't always work because it's too small. So let's click and add a value in there. Still too big. Let's try 0.0005. Let's get in there. It's not looking quite right because we're still using the angle method for the bevel. So you get some really quirky looking geometry there. I mean, it's not the end of the world. I mean, it's going to be a small thing in the scene. So you could leave it like that, to be honest. I chose to change the way I did this by using edge weights. So we'll come to that in a second. Again, you don't have to do this. So what I did instead was select all the edges apart from the one at the back. So select that one first then, and then press Ctrl I to invert it, the selection. Now we have everything selected apart from that one at the back. Now we can drag this one all the way to 1, and we can switch the limit method in the modifier to weight. And that will just target where the bevels go on this object. Yes, it gives us more geometry, but not too worried about that. But it gives us a much cleaner topology, which is what I was kind of after. So that will do for the bolt or the nut, whatever you want to call it. Let's make the bevel a little bit smaller perhaps. Yeah, that's looking good. Let's turn wireframe off. And just have a quick look in matte caps. That looks great. So with that done, we're going to select this one and just place it where it should go. So I'm going to click on the red axis, hold down the Control key for snapping to vertex, and hopefully it snaps where I want it to, which it did. Now at this point, I thought it's a little bit too big, so select everything, S, Shift X, so it doesn't scale it in its depth, only on its width. That would do. Now we can select these, or select one of them anyway, add a mirror modifier, and also for the hubcap. I want to duplicate this with Alt-D, just quickly add some more support loops there. There we go, and then inset there, not forgetting the inside. Just quickly rename that to hub bolt, and make sure the 3D cursor is your transform point. Alt-D, rotate 90, and then apply some random rotation to each of the objects. And there you have it. Part 1 is done. Let's check it out. Look at that. It looks great, I think. And this is coming up in part 2. We'll work on the rest of the elements. So make sure you join me for that. It will be very nice. Thank you. For now, take care. See you next time.